Hi guys, welcome to another Android development tutorial. Today I'm going to be showing you how to create, configure, and launch an Android virtual device from the Android Studio IDE. Knowing how to do this is crucial to the mobile app developer. All that is really needed to be able to follow through with this tutorial is maybe some minimal knowledge of the Android Studio IDE. Even if you don't know much about Android Studio, then please feel free to follow along with me regardless. Alrighty, let's get to it. Now before we get our hands dirty with creating Android virtual devices, we need to take some time to sort through some hardware related necessities. In order for any AVD device to be able to work the way it should, it first requires the use of a special tool called an emulator. Now for those of you who may not know what an emulator is, then the simplest way to think of it is just a small program that either mimics a physical device or, in other words, pretends to be something that it's not. As it turns out, Android Studio comes with its very own built-in emulator designed specifically for testing Android applications. Let's go on ahead and install this emulator now if you haven't done so already. So to install the emulator, we'll want to open up the Software Development Kit Manager. We can do this by navigating the toolbar. You want to select Tools, and then you'll want to choose the Software Development Kit Manager from the drop-down menu here. Okay. So a dialog box that looks somewhat similar to this one right here should pop up. Now you should also see a left side navigation bar of options that you could choose from. To get to where we need to go, you'll want to select Appearance and Behavior, and then you'll want to select System Settings here, and then you'll want to select Android Software Development Kit to get to this section right here. Okay, so next you'll want to go to the SDK Tools tab here, and then you want to select the tool that says Android Emulator. Let's go ahead and install this. Let me go ahead and install it right quick. Remember, you'll probably want to have a connection to the internet before attempting to do this. So let's give it a minute. Okay. Alrighty, so now the Android emulator has been successfully installed, but unfortunately we're not quite finished with the setup just yet. There's one more important tool that we need to take into consideration, and that tool is called the Hardware Accelerator. Okay, so now I'll give you a quick overview of the Hardware Accelerator. So what the Hardware Accelerator is, it's just a simple program that allows the Android Studio Emulator to run at a much faster and more reliable speed. If you attempted to run an emulator without the accelerator, then you most likely wouldn't be too pleased with the end results because the emulator would run unbearably slow. As it turns out, there are actually two very common hardware accelerator options. The first is the Microsoft Hyper-V and the Windows Hypervisor platform, this one here. This happens to be the most popular one to this date because it has the capability to run pretty well on Windows machines that have either Intel or AMD processors. Now keep in mind that before the Windows Hypervisor platform was first developed, people whom owned machines that had AMD processors couldn't really use Android Studio's built-in emulator because support was exclusively available to the machines that had Intel CPUs, which pretty much brings us to the second option, which is Intel's Hardware Accelerated Execution Manager, this one right here. Now, this program can in fact get the job done, but again, it only works with machines that have Intel CPUs. It can be used as an alternative in case for any reason the Windows hypervisor isn't really available. I know I can't use it because my computer doesn't have an Intel CPU. I had to run with the Windows hypervisor platform. Uh, so how would we enable the Windows hypervisor platform? Well, here, let me give you an idea of how we would do that. So in order to enable the Windows hypervisor platform, what you'll need to do is you'll want to go to the control panel. Okay, you'll want to select the programs option right here. And then finally, you'll want to pick the turn Windows features on or off option right there. And after you've clicked that link, then it should bring up this tiny dialog box here. Go ahead and scroll down to see if you can find Hyper-V and the Windows Hypervisor platform in the list below. In my case, I don't really have the Hyper-V option in my list, but I do have the Windows Hypervisor platform option. I really don't know why I don't have Hyper-V in my list, but if for any reason you can't find both of them, then just enable the one that you do see. And it may be a good idea to enable the virtual machine platform as well, but your situation could possibly be different, so don't completely take my word for it. Okay, so I've enabled both of these two things. If you happen to have the Hyper-V option in your list, go ahead and enable that too. Oh yeah, so keep in mind that after enabling these things and clicking OK, what's going to happen is it's going to issue a system reboot. So you'll either want to reboot your system right away or you want to reboot it at a later time. Either or, enabling and disabling anything here, namely those things, will require a reboot. So let me go ahead and do that right quick. Okay, so the system reboot just finished and now we're back in the Android Studio. There's one last thing we need to take care of before we actually start working with the emulator. Because my system is running an AMD CPU, the speed of the emulator is going to solely rely on the Windows hypervisor platform, which means I'll have to download the Android emulator hypervisor driver in the SDK manager. This one right here. Go ahead and select that. Okay, now keep in mind that if your machine were running an Intel CPU and you did not want to use the Windows hypervisor platform, then you really wouldn't be downloading this driver. Instead, you would be downloading this driver there, which is Intel's Hardware Execution Manager driver. Let me go ahead and download my machine's driver right quick. Okay, give it a sec. Once again, remember to have a connection to the internet before attempting to do this. Okay, so the driver is now ready to go. Let me just close the dialog box. Alrighty, now we can finally start working with the emulator. So let's go on ahead and open up the AVD manager. There are two ways you can do this. You can either select the Android phone icon below the main toolbar in the upper right hand corner, or you could also navigate the toolbar, go to Tools, and then select AVD Manager in the resulting drop-down menu. But to be honest with you, I personally prefer to click the icon. I don't know why. Once the AVD Manager is open, then this is the dialog box that you should be seeing. I know I may not have completely defined what an Android virtual device actually is, so now I'll go on and tell you. So an AVD is basically a configured virtualized version of a physical Android device, like for example a phone, a tablet, a watch, or even a TV. But before I get into more detail, I just want to let you in on a little developer's tip. An AVD is not the same thing as the Android Studio Emulator. AVDs and emulators are two entirely different things altogether. AVDs represent physical devices, but emulators simply load the AVDs and then run them. For the sake of simplicity in this tutorial, we're going to be creating a somewhat simple AVD. So to do this, we'll need to click the Create Virtual Device button here. Once we do, it should bring us to this screen here. Now, as it turns out, creating any AVD is almost always a three-step procedure. The first step is choosing what specific device model hardware we'd like our AVD to behave like. I'll go on and select the phone option in the category column, and then I'm going to choose the Pixel 2 extra large device model, which of course is a mobile phone. And then I'll move on to the second step in the AVD creation procedure, which is choosing which specific version of Android I'd like my Pixel 2 to run. I'll pick one of the recommended versions of Android, specifically for this device model, version number 7, which is a relatively older version. If you can't find the correct version of Android to suit your app's needs, you could install it by clicking the blue download links to the right of the version that you're looking for. Finally, I can progress to the final step of creating the AVD, which is deciding what I would like my AVD to be called. I think I'll just run with the default name Pixel 2 XL API 24. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and click Finish. After completing the setup, you'll be brought back out to the main AVD Manager dialog box, except this time you should see the newly created AVD. To start up the AVD inside the Android Studio Emulator for the first time, click the green play button in the Action column here. Now, depending on your machine's capabilities, the emulator could take a minute or two to load, so give me a sec. Okay, so once the emulator startup procedure is finally finished, your emulator should appear somewhat similar to this. Depending on the AVD selected device model and Android version, there's a chance that yours may look slightly different. As you can see, the emulator's behavior is very much like that of a physical mobile phone, just as it should be. Alrighty, so now that we've successfully started up our AVD inside the emulator, I'll go ahead and show you how you could deploy an example application onto it. Now there are actually two ways you can do this. The first method is actually the easiest. All you would need to do is open up your app project in Android Studio and then navigate the special toolbar of icons at the top right corner. You'll want to select the green play symbol icon here, which would then prompt you to select an existing AVD and then start up the emulator if it weren't already running. The second approach is you could also run your app by dragging and dropping the app's APK file into the emulator window via drag and drop support. For those of you who may not be familiar with APK files just yet, I advise you try to stick to the first approach for the time being. I'll go on and show you a quick deployment example. So to do this, I'm actually going to use the first approach by clicking the green play icon in the toolbar here. Okay, give it a sec. When you see this dialog prompt, select the AVD you'd like to use and then click the OK button. As you can clearly see, there's only one here, so I'm going to go ahead and click OK. Okay, give it a sec. Depending on the size or complexity of your app project, it could take half a minute or two to deploy, but once it finishes, you should be able to manipulate your app project in the AVD just as you would any physical device. However, keep in mind that almost no emulator is 100% perfect, so don't be surprised if you notice any inconsistencies in the way your apps run in comparison to how they run on physical devices. So yeah, with that said, let's now take some time to consider how exactly we would terminate the execution of an app in the AVD. Luckily, stopping the execution of an app is just as simple as deploying it. In the precise same toolbar that included the green play button, there happens to be another icon in the form of a red square that you can press to stop the app's execution. This one right here. Okay, or if for any reason you don't like that approach, you could also stop the app's execution via the second icon located in the Logcat window. But in order to use the second approach, you first need to select your app's specific package name in the drop-down menu here. Okay, and then you need to click the doubled arrow symbol, which should be towards the bottom left-hand corner. I know it's kind of small. I'll try my best to circle it. There it is. This will open up a mini menu of icons, and one of them will be a second red square or maybe even a red circle with an X in the middle if you're running an older version of the Android Studio IDE. So this is the alternative icon that you can use to terminate your app. Okay. Now what you probably didn't see before was the vertical toolbar of control options on the right hand side of the emulator. Unfortunately, the toolbar wasn't visible in the previous scenes because the screen recorder utility I'm using does not permit me to record multiple windows in the same session. So I drew up this little image here to show you what the emulator's personal toolbar would look like. As you can see, this toolbar contains a variety of controls ranging from power to volume control to device orientation. The control that I'll be focusing on in this tutorial is the very last control that encompasses the three dots. This control. So if you were navigating the emulator's personal vertical toolbar and you were to select the three dotted control, then a dialog box similar to this one would pop up. Now you should see a sidebar of additional controls for which you may use to manipulate the Android Studio Emulator. However, unlike the tools that you saw directly on the emulator toolbar, these happen to be a little bit more advanced, but don't worry, they're just as simple to use as the other ones. I'll show you two examples of controls that you might use as you become more comfortable with the emulator. Let's go on and take a quick look at the battery control. Now what this control does is it simulates a mobile phone's battery behavior so you can see how well your apps would function under various battery conditions. Adjusting the charge level toggle will change the resulting battery level in the emulator like so. I'll go ahead and set it to 50%, which of course is half full. Okay, I'll go ahead and zoom in on the battery. As you can see, the simulated battery level now appears to be half full. Now, if we were to adjust the simulated battery level to 0%, then what would happen is that under certain battery conditions, the emulator would automatically power itself off as if it were a genuine physical device. The battery conditions can be tested using these three drop-down menus here. Okay, so the second control that I want to introduce is the telephone control. Now, the telephone control is used to simulate incoming phone calls and text messages directly to the emulator. You can call the emulator from any desired number, or you can send in a text message. Let's go ahead and type in an example text message evaluation. I'm going to say hello, John Smith, and then I'm going to hit send. Now as you can see, the text message just came in the emulator window. Let's go ahead and open it up right quick. Okay, hello John Smith. Alright, so unfortunately what we can't really do is we can't actually reply to it because it was, again, it was sent from the uh, telephone control in the toolbar. So if, for example, we can't really just type the words hello, send, and hope that the message is going to, get back to where it came from. It just doesn't work that way. Well, there you have it. That pretty much concludes this tutorial on Android virtual devices and the Android Studio Emulator. The more you play around with the emulator, the more comfortable you will eventually become. Happy coding and yeah, best of wishes.